nationwide is to reduce the rate of recidivism. And Focus has gotten their rate of recidivism at one point below 10%. And right now it's around 15, because they track the numbers. And like I told you, they've been doing the Exodus program for 7 years. Focus has actually been in the jails for 20 years. But, as time goes on and as the Lord provides, things grow, things improve, and they've gotten up to the point where they're at today because they've been doing it for 20 years. But that's what recidivism is. Can I tell you a funny story?
I would love to hear one. Then I want to come back to a little more on the definition of recidivism if I can add something. But tell me your story.
Okay. So Focus has an annual fundraising dinner. And a couple of years ago, they invited the retiring Attorney General to keynote our annual fundraiser. And the funny thing that he said when he got up, he says, "I don't know why you want me to come and speak to you. I put just about everybody in this room in jail."
That is good.
And he said, "But you know what you're doing is so crucial." He said, "You have gotten the rate of recidivism down below 10%. And he says, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it, because it's making a huge difference in the jails around here and in the community around here." And he was really applauding Focus Ministry at that time. And since then, and it's been, like I said, 7 years, the state of Tennessee has approached Focus, and they would love to have these programs in every prison in the state. But Focus, I mean, you've got to have the volunteers. You have to have the manpower all across the state. And that's, I guess, quite frankly, a job much larger than we're staffed for at this time. But anyway, go ahead with your next question.
No, let me just say something to the listeners before we go any further. The mission of Right Thinking Foundation is to help fight recidivism and work with hardship economically disadvantaged populations, and obviously people that are in prison fit that description. But what I've learned is that when people are incarcerated and they get out, sometimes when they come back out, there's nowhere for them to go but down again, because they're not being received back into their communities. And that's a problem. But just to stay at the higher level of the definition of recidivism, so it's very specific what you said. A person gets out, and then they commit a crime, and then they get arrested, and then they get convicted, and then they get put back in. And that's the cycle of recidivism. But the question that we're trying to figure out here is why. And there's two things that I want to throw at you to talk about here, because I've got some information about you and things that you're involved in that I believe is part of the answer. What I'm learning is that it's a problem of epidemic proportions in our country, and people are trying to figure out what can we do about it to reduce recidivism and return people to society to become productive, contributing members. And so my connection with the Napoleon Hill Foundation that you are very much involved in, that I want to explore in a minute, is a big part of it. The positive mental attitude that I'm going to get you talking about in a minute. So what I just want to say now, though, is basically this. I know from reading your background and talking to you that you have come to one of the same conclusions that I have, in that the very best way to fight recidivism is to get to the youth before they go too far out in the world and screw up, because it's so much easier to keep them from coming out of a prison than going back in if they've never gone in the first time. And so I've got in my hand here off of your website something that I just think is one of the most powerful things I've ever read, and we'll give your website out in a minute. But this is a paper, and I don't know if you wrote it or where you got it, but Invest Your Best in a Young Adult. 40 valid reasons you should invest in a young adult. I joined that today to get this download, and it's got the most powerful things I've ever seen. So if you want to talk about the concept, please, of how we can reduce recidivism and start with the youth and things that you're doing, I'm going to interrupt you a few times because I started highlighting of these 40 things, the ones that I agree with every single thing on here, but I want to throw out some of the ones that I believe are the ones that I believe the strongest in. So Gary, I want to thank you on behalf of everybody for what you're doing to have the servant's heart to make the world a better place in which to live, the Napoleon Hill motto, mission statement. And for those of you that want to know more, Gary's a part of an international best-selling book here, Positive Mental Attitude, Inspiring Stories from Real People Who Applied Napoleon Hill's Most Important Success Principle. And there's 13 people in there that are discussing these things, and Gary is one of them. So before it's over with, let's just do it now. Gary, how can people get a hold of you and find out about your book that you've written? And I mean, you're an international best-selling author here, and people need to read what you've written. How do they get a hold of that?
The best way to reach out to me would be through my website, which is yoursuccesspuzzle.com.
I read that today. Your Success Puzzle is an amazing program that you've started. So your Success
there's a
Puzzle.
whole story about how I came up with that name.
Okay, so I've take it over, Gary. Talk about why you believe that getting to the youth is the answer.
Well, let me just digress for a minute. The state of Tennessee had approached Focus to, they were going to state sponsor some of the programs, but they said you can't have all faith-based classes. You have to have some secular classes. So Steve Humphreys, the director of Focus, knew that I had published a secular workbook that I had made from Think and Grow Rich on persistence, and he asked me if I'd teach it. And I said, well, I think you may want me to teach the Napoleon Hill Keys to Success. It's a much broader, more comprehensive program which covers the 17 principles. And he was like, yeah, that would be fine, because each semester is 12 weeks, and I could fill up 12 weeks very easily with that content. So I began teaching the classes, and it was a little strange at first, because here I am talking to guys that have 10, 20-year sentences. They may have 10 more years left, about their definite major purpose and how they can change their lives and live a better life. And anyway, I had one gentleman told me after he had completed the course that during the first few weeks he felt very depressed about the information. He said, but it wasn't until we got to the chapter on positive mental attitude that his whole outlook changed. He said, that chapter, that lesson changed my whole attitude. And you know, Steve, that's where the difference is made, is in your attitude, and the way you think, and the way you perceive things. And he said from then on, he changed his friends from the negative complainers to the positive, optimistic, hopeful crowd of people. And he's like, it made a world of difference to him. And he's actually been released since then, and he's doing quite well on the outside. And Focus has a apartment house, a halfway house, if you will, where inmates being released, if they've gone through their programs, can stay there, and they actually have a work program that they can help them either work or find work, get their resumes ready. And so it kind of evolved when I was speaking in a class one day. I came up with the idea of a success puzzle. Like, life is like a puzzle, and unless you have a clear image of what that image is on the puzzle box, you can't put it together very easily. So that's how I came up with my name of my business. But so starting my business, I'm trying to figure out who is my niche market. And for a while I thought, well, it would be prison officials, the conventions where the sheriffs get together, the wardens get together, the guards get together, and they learn new things. And I was thinking, well, that's my target market, to teach the Napoleon Hill philosophy. And as time went on, I'm like, no, that's not really the market. It's the youth, it's the teens, it's the college age, it's the 20-somethings that are so susceptible to peer pressure to the paradigms of society, and of course the things that they learned growing up, which sometimes are so erroneous and so asinine and they actually believe, and they have poor self-esteem and poor self-images. And those are the people that have given up on themselves and eventually end up in jail. And ironically, you find that you have the grandfathers, the fathers, and the sons all in prison at the same time. And it's terrible that those kind of situations exist. So we've got to reach the kids in the high school. And I go into the local schools around Knoxville with the Junior Achievement Program, where I can also teach these principles of believe in your dreams, believe in yourself. And that's what the next chapter in the next book that's coming out, and I don't have a name for it yet, but it'll be on my website when it's published, and it will be published by the end of October. And it's geared towards the idea of, when we get older and we think back and we think, God, I wish I'd known then what I know now. I wish I knew when I was 18 or 20 what I know now when I'm 40 or 50. Life would have been so much different. Maybe I would have been so much further along. So I'm writing a chapter for this next book, but I'm also going to write my own book about that very idea.
Gary, let me interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
As I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm just smiling because, I used to own a marina one time, and just to make a little quick analogy here, Jesus was a fisherman of souls, You are a person who is obviously has a purpose, a mission to really do and give for other people. You care. And so you got connected with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, which, Don Green's been on the show 3 times, and I've met with people that are affiliated with Napoleon Hill. And there's a lot of people out there that want to make a difference, but they don't really do very much to make a difference other than express the desire to make a difference. That's a basic Napoleon Hill thought right there, is thoughts without action. There's never a result there. But I want to just go a little more about you as a person. Again, I've asked the question in the beginning of the show, but how did you get to be like you are, that has such a strong faith and desire to be there for other people, to put others before yourself? Because you are really dedicated. I mean, you formed a company that's specific for that. You're writing books for that. It's not easy to make a living doing this. I mean, I don't think it's about money. If it were, you'd be doing something else. So tell us a little more, though. How'd you get hooked up with Napoleon Hill Foundation? How'd you get hooked up with Tom Too Tall Cunningham?
Well, that's a long story. I got hooked up with Think and Grow Rich through Bob Proctor's organization. I was in network marketing about 10 years ago, and I was trying to talk to people about lifestyle and what they want, fulfilling their dreams, and I was presenting opportunities to them. It was just a business model, and it's like, it's like giving a child a car. Like, here's a car, isn't it great? Just wait, till one day you can drive it. So I began to think, they need more than just a business model to achieve their dreams. They need coaching. They need personal development. They have to grow. Their minds have to change. And I started getting involved. I got involved with Bob Proctor's organization, Life Success Consulting, to become a life coach. And I went through his program, and he was a big proponent of Think and Grow Rich. You've got to read this. You've got to hold mastermind meetups around this book, which is what I started doing. I began holding teleconference calls and webinars and having meetings with people, teaching, going through the book, Think and Grow Rich, teaching it, learning it. I've probably read the book 3 dozen times. And it really influenced my life. And then one day I was walking away from a job because I was in construction all my life, and I didn't particularly like it. It just fell into my lap because of what my father had done, and I just went to work for him. And I thought to myself, I don't want to really earn my income for the next 30 years like I've done the past 30.